see how much I like it. You know.
Interesting. Is my sound quality okay?
I think you sounded pretty good. Do I sound okay?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you got the fancy mic and everything.
Oh, I wish I'd done. All right, we'll see. I forgot to turn on one little freaking toggle and it won't let me do it while we're live. So we're live now. Hello, YouTubes. You guys let me know how we sound, especially let me know if I'm echoing over on Andy's side. But yeah, we're live. Hi. Hello, 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 everyone. Thank you for joining me. This is Person Behind the Pages, and I am your host, Nicholas W. Fuller. Tonight, I'm joined by the prolific Andy Peloquin. How you doing?
Good. For a minute there, I thought you were going to say talented, and that would have set the show off on a like immediately at a lie. So prolific, I'll take that one.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Not talented. The untalented, but very good at writing lots of words very fast. Andy Peloquin.
The mediocre talented.
That's funny. So Andy, for anyone that doesn't know you, can you go ahead and give your like a little bit of an introduction, please, sir?
Sure. So I
Besides,
write
like
dark.
talented, right? Right. We'll start with that.
Yes, exactly. We've got that up front. It's good. The interview's tone has been set. I write dark epic fantasy. I think I skew more towards the dark, but then there's so much like epic stuff that happens around it that I'm like, I have to do both. I love playing on the darker side of the fantasy genre, so thieves, assassins, um, criminals, a little bit of special forces, military, fantasy again, everything. And then I have one cyberpunky sci-fi space opera that I got to write because I wanted to write another assassin, and all my fantasy series just had too many of them. So I went sci-fi because no one could tell me I'd written too many sci-fi assassins. So I think I've pigeonholed myself a little bit. Two of my series have the word assassin in it, and then but it's fun. It's what I like to do.
There you go. There you go. I mean, yeah. Stories about people killing people. What more do you want? You know.
I find that in the middle of extreme violence and loss and pain and suffering and all that goes into sort of living a violent life, there's so many wonderful opportunities to explore strong emotions that you wouldn't get elsewhere. I mean, like if you're fighting for your life, what do you do? When you're about to die, how do you face death? Things like that I think are very interesting. I don't really dig magic as much. I can write it because I have to, because it's fantasy, but it's like, you give me a human or a person, right? Yeah. Whether magic or no, sword skill or no, whatever, whoever they are, and I will poke and prod at them until they kind of bleed onto the page for me emotionally and physically. You give me magic, and all of a sudden it starts to feel like a science assignment, and that's where I'm like, I don't really want to do that kind of homework. I don't want to show anybody my what do they call it? Show them my work. I just want to write the stuff.
Yeah, fair. So I see Tim, I see Aaron, I see Dan, I see Bo, all in the chat. Thank you guys for being here. Appreciate it. I am kind of playing with some different software. Andy is almost twice as loud as Nick. Okay, so I think I can adjust that, and we'll see how that goes. Let me know if that's better when Andy talks. So, and the reason why I want to try some different software too is I'm trying to do the live, but also I'm recording at the same time. And the software I'm using now is better for recording because one of the things that we're going to talk about during live, I want to maybe make another video about, and I might take some of Andy's wisdom and go drop it into this other video. So, yeah, maybe Andy is naturally just a louder person, as he said in the chat just now. So, but my kind of flow for tonight that I have envisioned, I want to talk to Andy about Andy, a topic I think he knows very well. Then I want to get into a little bit about kind of reading and writing. Andy reads incredibly fast, as I've noticed from his Instagram. And how does he do it? That's one thing I want to learn. And also, Andy writes incredibly fast. I was just talking with a friend about Stephen King's book on writing. Have you ever read that, Andy?
I did. I loved it.
Right. And I feel like his most iconic piece of advice in it, of course, is read a lot and write a lot. Right. And these things are easier if you do them faster, and you do them quite quickly, Andy. So I want to know your secrets. In fact, I asked a friend at one point. I asked like a couple writer friends, "Hey, I'm going to talk to Andy Peloquin. Like, what do you guys think I should ask?" And they said, uh, "What like demonic rituals did Andy perform in order to write so fast? Like, and what sacrifices did he make? And let us know exactly so that I can perform them too." So you're
I'll
gonna
tell
have
you,
to
it
send me.
involves a, a mid-level demon, a banjo, and a cucumber. That's all I can say for now.
My mind's spinning.
I apologize. I have been I've been working on a story that's like got a lot of that like really ridiculous humor.
I
If
love
you
it.
read my 6 current series,
Yeah.
there's the occasional joke, there's the occasional like bit of sarcasm and great banter. But
Yeah.
this one that I'm working on right now, it's basically I have been told you need to write Kings of the Wild meets Dungeon Crawler Carl. And
Ah.
I am having so much fun with it. I'm listening to Dungeon Crawler Carl, while I'm working out and stuff, and I am having so much fun. But my sense of humor has gotten like way skewed by this muscle that I've been like over flexing in my writing. It's been so much fun, but it's definitely where my brain is at.
I love it, dude. I mean, yeah, I love the banjo and the cucumber. I'm just thinking of how these things go together with the demon. Maybe use the cucumber like a pick on the banjo. Maybe something more that the dungeon crawler Carl game AI would think of. Having to do with feet and cucumbers. I can imagine.
Yeah, there you go.
I've been loving that series too lately. I would like it's so
It
fun.
It really is. I think when it gets tangled up in the mechanics of the game, that's when it suffers. But when it's
Sure.
just the people being people and doing kind of the ridiculous things, I almost wish that it could kind of lose a lot of those complex mechanics. Like I'm on book 4 right now, The Gate of the Feral Gods, and just the character moments, the addition of Katya to the
Yeah.
team,
Yeah.
Princess Donut, and the whole
Yeah.
storyline, all the stuff going on. It's just delightful. And then it gets a little bit bogged down. And this is just the nature of lit RPG, which, I'm here for it. But I'm just
Yeah.
like anytime the game stuff goes aside and they're just being themselves on the page, it's just a riot.
Yeah. So I think I'm with you. Like there are parts of the game that I kind of like appreciate. Like the leveling up and the new gear, I think sort of adds to it and just sort of like you get
Yes.
to see the progression. But like there's the one dungeon level where it's all about the trains and there's this whole mystery of like how the trains
Yeah.
work and it's like okay, like great.
Yeah. Or even like right now in Gate of the Feral Gods, it's like we're dealing with this war between the gnomes and the camels and the things, and it's like, sure, there's a war, like, and that's not to say the writing is bad. On the contrary, it is addicting as all hell. But
Yes,
for
yes.
me, it's the same thing. When I get to a book that has just long magical descriptions or anything like that, my eyes kind of glaze over, and I'm like, give me the little snippets of humanity inside the magical development, because that's 100% what I'm here for as a reader.
Fair, fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, I'm with you. I am surprised with like the snippets of humanity. By the way, if you guys in chat, if you guys have read Dungeon Crawler Carl too, I want to hear what you guys think about it. But yeah, like the way that he's as the series progresses. Like I just finished book 5, I think. Yeah. Um.
Ooh,
Yeah, and there's just more and more of like Carl's backstory and weaving that in
I
and
love
whatnot.
that.
Right. I'm really just amazed what Matt Dinniman has been able to pull off. Then there's a moment in book 5 where I'm like, he made me feel some feels, and I'm like, you
Yeah,
son of a bitch. How and why did you do that in this book where I'm expecting like meth wars between camels and goblins? Like,
right.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a real testament to his skill as an author, is that he's able to just like drip feed backstory, because as you
yeah,
know, when you write fantasy specifically, backstory is kind of everything, so you kind of have
right,
to go hard on it initially, or you give enough that people sink their teeth into it. Whereas with this, it's very much like, here's just enough,
right,
and then the way that he is with Dona and then with the other characters, it kind of shows who he is without really getting into more about who he was. And
right.
then every little bit and piece that we find out about him and his mom, or him and his mom and his dad, or him and and it's just like, okay, this I need more, and then he makes you wait. and
Yeah.
then he eventually gives you just one more little drop, and it's
Right.
very addicting. He's cracked
Right.
the code.
Yeah. 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 But I'm not gonna make the whole night about Dungeon Crawler Carl. But like one more, well, two more things. One,
Apologies.
no, 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 no. I am so here for it. I'm just like, but one, I feel like the whole series would completely fall flat without Donut. I think like Donut
Oh,
makes it
a
all work.
100%.
Okay. All right. I'm glad that we have the same
Yeah,
analogy
no,
here.
donut is the emotional stakes. It's
Hmm.
the animal sidekick. It is the comedic value. Donut is everything, and Carl is just the muscle,
Right.
essentially.
Yeah, but like but
And
Carl is intentionally, and I know that he does this intentionally. Like he's talked about how he's done this intentionally. He wanted to create this crazy scenario and make sort of a normal person going through this nuts scenario. But because Carl,
yeah,
especially in the early books, he's so normal, he's kind of
yeah,
a little boring, and it's Donut that pushes things forward, and Donut's that's daring, that does change as the book goes on. Like
yeah,
Carl starts building plans and it gets like a lot more exciting. um but in those like that
yeah.
first book especially, I'm
With
like, man, if it wasn't for Donut, like this thing would go nowhere.
Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook gave him a ton more agency
Yeah.
in big picture story stuff. Like he
Yes.
is the agency in every scene essentially,
Yeah.
but giving him the Dungeon Anarchist Cookbook, it changed who he was in relation to the game, which made him a much more compelling character in that he is pushing the story forward as opposed to just kind of along for the ride. He is still along for the ride,
Right.
but
Right.
he
Right.
is now kind of zigging when people expect him to zag. He's
Right.
doing things, even small things, that make him a much more compelling character. So
Right.
this is what I go for when I read a book. You give me a good character like that who's got, it's got the emotional stakes, it's got good agency, it's got a good storyline, all of that, and I'm here for it. This is why I read fast, because I look for these books that I'm just like, I just want to know more about the person. The story around it is just window dressing. I want the people to be interested.
Yeah. I used to feel like plot was the driver for me, and I mean, I still want an interesting plot, and I still I really like a story with high stakes, but at the same time, it's the characters that you remember, even when they're
Yeah.
saving the universe, it's the characters that you're like, oh yeah, but the Mandalorian's cool.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And there are so many books that prove plot is less important. I used to say that plot is almost unimportant, but then reading Becky Chambers, the long way to a small angry planet,
Yes, yes, yes.
it proved to me that you need plot in addition to characters. Every character moment in that book was just delightful.
Yeah.
But by the end, there was no consistent through plot line, and I was disappointed to where I have no impetus to read the rest of the series. I will someday go back, but there are so many others that I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Legends and Lattes, on the other hand, amazing character and just enough plot that you are just addicted. Like this book is, I would say, a masterclass at being character driven, low plot. I think that's what most cozy fantasy really, really does well, is just giving you enough plot to keep you invested, but then making every character moment really sing.
Right, right, agreed. um Dan from the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast, he says, I have heard amazing things about Dungeon Crawler Carl. I need to start soon. Dan, I think like you got to give it a try. Get through like that first book, and I think you'll if you like the first book, then you'll like every other. I think.
And if you're an audiobook person,
Oh yeah.
100% do it on audio. Like I don't think I would have enjoyed the books as much as I am enjoying them now without Jeff Hayes' narration. Like just his performance of Princess Donut is worth its weight in gold.
Right, right. Well, and also Ryan Cahill's here. How you doing? And Bo Kelly, he said, Donut is the start of the show. Her sass is so freaking funny. So this is the last point I want to talk about Dungeon Crawler Carl. Uh, and kind of going back to your point just a moment earlier about trying to kind of write humor, right? And you're doing like a mash of Kings of the Wild and Dungeon Crawler Carl, which sounds amazing. I need that in my life for sure. Um, but like the humor in Dungeon Crawler Carl is really interesting because you hear so much about it being a really funny book, and it is, but there's two characters that are funny. One is Donut, and the other is the game AI, and that's it. Like
Oh,
Carl is
that
not.
game AI is just, man, that AI,
Yeah.
that is some high level comedic writing
Yes.
that I aspire to one day match, because that is spectacular writing right there.
But yes, and then it's kicked up to that next notch with the audiobooks because they do that super announcer voice, and it's hey, like this
Yes.
is what's going on, and it makes it so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
This is one of those books like Red Rising or Lies of Locke Lamora or the Rhaenyra series, where you've got a great book and then you bring in just the right narrator, and it makes it a truly singular work of art that the book itself almost could never be. And that's not to denigrate the authors, but it's almost like a great script paired with a great actor
Right,
makes a movie like The Usual Suspects or like Ocean's 11 or like The Avengers. Like it takes multiple layers of excellence to create something truly spectacular, and this is something that these very few performers and performances have created. And so Dungeon Crawler Carl, I think, definitely belongs alongside these other greats because of the performance by Jeff Hayes.
yeah, yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. I've been really impressed. Also, I know that in like I think the sixth book they add like Travis Baldry as part of the narration, and then is it something Warnock, I think? But like that's kind of so anyway, there's more narrators, and I'm excited to like get a taste of that once I get there. I got to start that one soon. I think it's going to be like
I
next week
think
when I
in I
start.
think in book 3 is when they added a first sort of guest narrator
Oh,
for
really?
one dwarf character, and then in book 4, I think Travis Baldry and one other person have a few lines here or there.
Okay.
But then, yeah, as those characters, I guess, recur or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm here for it, right? Like
Yeah.
this is again Travis Baldry took something amazing, which was Cradle,
Yes.
and with his performance elevated it to Cradle. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, completely. Like his voice for Arthos. Like I'm doing a poor imitation, but like,
Yeah.
man, it
Oh,
adds so much. Yes. Right.
or Athan, right? Or
Yeah.
Yaren. Yaren's performance,
Yeah.
that is some high level acting. I have tried to narrate books before. I cannot do female voices, but the way that he just leans into the Yaren of it all is chef's kiss.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Man. All right. All right. I'm I'm really enjoying just nerding out about books with you. This is super fun. Um,
Yeah.
but let's get back to like my plan for the show tonight. Let's talk about you, Andy. So I know that you live in Canada now, and I assume that you're originally Canadian. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Canadian father.
But you also said that you lived most of your life in Japan and Mexico, which is not Canada. So that's
No, it's definitely.
pretty interesting. I'd love to hear more about what brought you like all over the world, and like how much of most of your life is most of your life.
So my parents were missionaries.
Okay.
They were living in Japan when I was born. I was the first of my siblings. I'm number 5 of 11, which is a story in and of itself. I'm the first of my siblings born in Japan.
Okay.
Before that, they were doing missionary work in the Philippines. There's a bunch more after me born in Japan, and then we lived there doing the missionary work till I was 14, and then we hopped across the world to the culturally diametric opposite country of Mexico, which is, again, missionary work continuing on there. I met my wife there, started a family there, lived there till I was 30, the ripe old age of 30, and then made the move to my home country of Canada for the first time.
Wow. That is wild. So I guess it was your wife Mexican there, and like what made you guys decide Canada?
She's Spanish. We
Okay.
met there. I had known her family. They were also fellow missionaries, so we kind of met through the organization. Match made in heaven, as they say. She had 4 children,
Okay.
and by the time we made the move, they were getting to the age where they needed to start spreading their little wings and making their own way in the world. So it was like in Mexico, there's not a lot of opportunities that we could see because I had been doing writing and copywriting and online work for years. So I had no kind of business to pass on to them and no really understanding of the business culture in Mexico because I was
Sure.
working remote. So it was like, well, we could stay or we could move to Canada and give them a chance at kind of a more sustainable future. And luckily it's worked out. They've got my sons are both in the trades, mechanic and welder, doing super good for themselves.
Solid.
One daughter lives in Spain. She moved last year. The other daughter is here, rocking the young person TikTok life, traveling all the time. So it's definitely, looking back, it was a great choice. A lot of trepidation before that move, and it's still very, very weird because living in Canada is in many ways very opposite of Mexico. In Mexico, it's like you're friends with everybody in 15 minutes. You're invited to their wedding after 30 minutes, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Here in Canada, you can know people for years and years and years, and they're very friendly right off the bat. But it takes a lot to push it past that first level of friendliness to friends.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's funny that the majority of my friends here in Canada are other, South Americans or
Mhm.
Latin Americans who have come to live here, and we just kind of instantly connect in a way that you really only get in that culture.
Sure. Sure. That makes sense. That's really interesting. Uh, and so, sorry, like, how long you lived quite a while in Japan first, right? And you mentioned that like the
14 years.
okay, okay. And then yeah, like culturally it's it's very, very different from Japan to Mexico, right?
Yes.
You
Oh
were
yeah. In Japan, everything is clean and neat and organized and punctual and reserved. In Mexico, it is a riot of colors and flavors and sights and sounds and music. It is there is something truly spectacular about just walking down a street in Mexico and seeing a party kick off out of nowhere. And it's just we went to Hawaii, my wife and I, last year, and we were like, there's something wrong with this beach. And it took us about till the second day to realize there was no music because
uh,
Hawaii is a massive amount of Asians. They come from Japan, they come from Korea, China, and so it's a very, very Asian style culture. Everybody's very quiet and reserved. There's beach. In Mexico, it's like there's 5 different mariachi bands walking up and down. Every restaurant has their own sound system. Every person on the beach has their own. It is a glorious melange of music and noise and fun that is very, very spectacular.
yeah, yeah. I like that. I grew up in Southern California, so like Mexico adjacent, and like I
There
kind
you
of
go.
I dig like kind of that vibe of like the mariachi music and just sort of the vibrant like joyous like Latin culture. I love how they just sort of embrace like life and all the beauty of it, without being. I mean, I have heard from people that have been to Japan. I haven't got a chance to go yet. I'd love to, but like people that've been to Japan, they're like, this is the only place in the world I feel where it's like an upgrade from everywhere else. Japan is so like good, so clean, so like great cuisine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet like so
Yeah.
reserved like that, which I feel would I don't know. It could be a downer after time. Whereas other places you're sort of
It
more
yeah,
open. Go ahead.
it's an amazing experience for a visit, but it's very hard to sort of make a life there because and this is no diss against the Japanese, but they have they're very set in their cultural ways, which gives them a very strong cultural heritage, but they're very resistant towards outsiders. You will always be a gaijin, even if you're only half foreigner. If you're half Asian, they can the features are very distinct, so they will always treat you kind of and it's not necessarily rude, it's just very kind of formal and
Right.
polite. But polite kind of is a bar to friendship. If you stop at polite, you never really get to kind of the mess that is friendship.
Wow. I want to write that down. That's gonna go in a story. Polite as a bar to friendship. Like, oh man. I mean, I get it, and that's why it's so good. It's because yeah, it's dropping some truth right there. I like it. I like it. All right. So, and I think that kind of relates to your ability to write so fast. But you mentioned that you were working as a remote worker and doing some like marketing, copywriting, that sort of thing. Was that like work that you started while you? Well, no, you. I guess you lived. You said you lived in 14 years in Japan, so I think you moved away from Japan while you were still, not an
A
adult or
teenager.
working. Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Okay,
Yeah.
so I guess you started kind of that remote work while you lived in Mexico.
Yeah. So I was teaching English in Mexico City.
Okay.
I was living in the South, and I was teaching English in the North and the West. So I would drive. I would get up at 5 a.m. because if I left the house later than 5:15, it would take twice as long to get where I need to go with the traffic. It's like LA traffic or New York City traffic. You're 5 minutes late, you are in it. So it was like out the door at 5 a.m. to be at my class by 6, because if I left at 5:15, I'd be there at 7:15
Mm-hmm.
late for the class. So I wound up with a lot of free time. And I kind of stumbled across a website that was hiring people to write. This was kind of the not early days of the internet, but when content was really kind of taking off, and there were tons of these how-to websites, and they were just kind of springing up. So I kind of stumbled into it, lucked out. So all that free time that I had between classes, I was teaching. My first class was 7 o'clock in the morning, and it ended at around 7:30 at night. So I was out of the house all day long, and I just had time to write. So I started, putting in some hours doing these articles and stuff. And I got good at just kind of sitting and grinding.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got by the time I think I'd been doing it for maybe 6 to 9 months, my word, my typing speed was like 90 accurate words per minute.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to write very, very quickly. And I kind of developed a knack for just like learning what I needed to learn and then putting it into the words that I wanted to say. And I guess because I've been making a career of this for 11 years, we can say that I had somewhat of a talent for it. But
No, we
it
established
just
in the
kind of
beginning you're untalented. No, no, no.
a moderate mediocre talent.
Okay.
That's
All
enough.
right. Fine, fine, fine. Fair.
Um, so yeah, I kind of did that for a few years, but then after a few years of that, I was like, okay, can I see myself doing this for 30, 40, 60 years?
Yeah.
Because it's freelance, there's no retirement.
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? I cannot see myself doing this. So I kind of looked around, and I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I had dabbled a little bit in writing. I like to tell people, and this is very, very true. When I was about 15, 16, I had all the free time that a teenager has, but
Mm-hmm.
this was before the internet. So I had a computer with no video games because my parents were very strict. It had Microsoft Word and Microsoft Paint, and I am a shit artist. Sorry, I don't know if swearing is bad on this show or
You're
not,
fine.
but
You're fine. You're fine.
okay. So I was like it was almost like I had no choice but to become an author
That's
by
funny.
sheer virtue of boredom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's so good. What is who was it? I know that Jed Hearn made a video recently where it's like if you want to be a better writer, just get bored. But it's sort of based on
Yeah.
advice from someone. I think like maybe Neil Gaiman was talking a little bit about how he's got like a writing gazebo or whatever, and like the only thing that he's allowed to do nothing. He allows himself to do nothing, or he can write. And after a while, the doing nothing actually
Ah.
gets pretty boring, and you actually want to do something
Yeah.
else, so you start writing. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. It's
Briefly,
addicting.
I see Pippin took over in the chat saying, "Taking notes. Do not be polite to anyone at Dragon Con." I love it. Yeah, I mean that's how friendships are born, right? We gotta break through that polite bar so that we could be real friends. So if I see you at
Right?
Dragon Con, I
You
hope
you
that
start off with polite.
yeah. Okay. All right. Start with polite, Pippin, and then go ahead and insult me if I see you at Dragon Con. That's what
Exactly.
I
That's the
want.
way it works.
Right. Speaking of, are you going to be at Dragon Con this year, Andy?
I am. I'm waiting until a week or two, or basically I've got a writers retreat next week. So after I come back from that, that's when I'll start announcing that I'm going to Dragon Con. But hey, anybody who's watching this, I'm going to Dragon Con. So
Nice, nice.
it has been announced. Done.
There we go. There we go. Well, I appreciate you. We got an exclusive drop, guys. Exclusive news. Andy Pelican. Yeah.
An exclusive.
That's cool. Well, I'm gonna go too, so we'll have to hang out. That'll be fun. Um, nice.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Um, So that's really interesting about all that writing, and I love that you're like, yeah, maybe I don't want to do this for 60 years. That totally makes sense. Um, so I do want to briefly, and we'll get to writing it more in a second. But you mentioned that, like, I have all my guests do a little questionnaire beforehand, and you mentioned that for a while you were a comic book salesman. How did that come about? Was that in Mexico City?
So I was living in Mexico, but I had
Okay.
a friend who had a comic book. Uh, she writes and produces her own comic books.
Mhm.
So I found out that she was going to be at a Comic Con in Anaheim, WonderCon, and I was like, oh, I'd
Okay.
love to go. She's like, yeah, come on in. I'll get you in, as a staff person, and you can, wander around and hang out with us and all of that. And I was like, okay, cool.
Talk my
So I
book.
got there, I helped set up. I'm a big guy. I carry boxes. It's kind of, I'm helpful and friendly. And afterwards, she was like, you want to go wander around? And I was like, okay. So I wandered around. I took in the whole convention in about an hour, and I was like, okay, I'm done now. And I go back to the table,
Yeah.
and I don't feel right just sitting behind the table and doing nothing
Sure.
because I'm big. I'm not a pretty girl. I don't really attract the right kind of attention to sell comic books just by this. So then I was like, well, fine. I'll start having fun and talking to people and selling comic books. And I blink and the weekend's over, and she's basically done more sales in this weekend than she had not ever before, but it was one of her best sale weekend. And it was just like I discovered that I loved talking about stories and books and nerdy shit with people. Like there was not a single moment that I was selling. I was just talking. I invented all kinds of ridiculous stuff. Like I was going around, I was offering people limited edition high fives as they passed the table. And people were they were loving it. I would literally draw in my hand with a like a Sharpie and high five them before it dried, and they had a limited edition high five, right? Like this was
Amazing.
conventions. They do something to me. I drink too much coffee. I don't get enough sleep. I
Mhm.
become too friendly, and hilarious shit happens at conventions. So
I love it.
people who are going to be at Dragon Con, I apologize in advance for whatever coffee makes me do.
Get yourself that limited edition high five, guys. That's pretty cool, man. Like
Absolutely.
so while you were doing this, I'm just curious, like were you like walking around all over the place? Were you kind of just like standing by her booth, her table?
Yeah, I was standing behind her
Okay.
table because she had, a bit of extra space. She's a very, very small person. She doesn't take up a whole lot of space, unlike me.
Right.
So I was like, cool. I'll just do this. 6'6".
6'6". Oh yeah, see? Yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah, and
I don't know if I could high five you actually.
and I, well, because it's limited edition special, I kind of adapt it to the recipient.
Fair, fair, fair. All right. All right.
And so actually, this was around the time. This was around the time that How I Met Your Mother was real popular. This was 2014, 2015, right? So this is a while ago.
Mhm.
And the Barney was all about the high fives. My wife and I were watching it. We loved it. So I was, people who were dressing up in cool costumes. I was, kind of doing the requesting the highest of high fives like Barney and Ted do. And
Yes, yes,
people
yes.
loved it because no one, like at conventions, I see the majority of the people, they're just kind of behind their booth. They're nice if you come up and talk to them, but they don't go out of their way to engage. So I am like, I cannot be bored and behind the table. I need to engage. I need to talk to people. So I am just noisy and loud and big and friendly, and that's kind of the persona that I have at conventions.
I like it.
And
No,
then you see me afterward, and I'm like, "Don't talk to me."
yeah, you're like, no, I'm writing. Right. Yeah, yeah, right. Leave me alone. I've got Word on my laptop and nothing else. Yeah. um,
Exactly.
yeah, I get that. Like, I can kind of, when I was really young, I used to do some like community theater, so I can kind of put on like the performative thing. But for me, being the kind of
Yeah.
nerd that I am, it's also like draining, you know. Um, so
Yes.
I hear what you're saying.
For me, it's like a switch.
Hmm.
I have a switch where I'm like, okay, I am now on stage, right? Whether
Hmm.
I'm at a convention and I'm selling books or I'm doing a presentation or whatever, I switch on, and then I can usually switch off, whether it's like, okay, this panel's done and I'm switching off, or oh, the day's done and I'm switching off, or I'm taking a little break, having a coffee and a sandwich or whatever I can fit in. And then it's like, okay, Here we go, switching back on. And I can usually, I'm pretty good at making that switch at this point. Or I guess that day I discovered I can make that switch.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
it helps me kind of wrap my head around. I am a very friendly, outgoing. It turns out I discovered that I am 51% extrovert, basically. Like I did the, the
Okay.
personality test,
Yes.
and I am extroverted, but it's like it's a razor fine margin.
Right.
But I am a very, very extroverted person. So it does come naturally once I make that mental switch. So usually it will be like, okay, I'm going to go to the thing, and then I'll hide away for a few minutes, whether I'll just go to the bathroom and scroll on my phone for a couple of minutes, and then I'll go back, and then after the convention's over, like I'll go hide away in my room for a minute,
Right.
and then
Right.
come out for the party or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
that's probably how I'll be at Dragon Con. I'll be hanging out with the Athon guys. At their table, I'll have books there that I'll be signing, but really, I'm just there
Nice.
for the socialization.
Right. Yeah, I've got. I think I might make some person behind the pages bookmarks and maybe some like temporary tattoos to give away, but I have nothing to sell. I'm just there to like hang out with
Hell
people,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um, so cool. All right, so quite interesting, different stuff. Let's get into reading and writing. First, I want to talk reading. So, bro, like
Okay.
you're putting down a book like sometimes in a day, like, but often it seems like you're on a new book like every like 3 days at least. Is that about the pace that you keep now?
So it depends on the book.
Okay, well,
For a
fair.
shorter book, so I read fantasy, right?
Right.
Fantasy, you're dealing with chonkers like
Chonkers.
good old Sandy Boy over here,
Yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
you're dealing with. So I just finished Voice of War by Zach Argyle
Hmm.
in about 2 days because it is only 350 pages, right?
Right.
I
Right.
can typically read around 100 pages in an hour
Wow.
because I
Interesting.
read
Okay.
I read fast.
So, like, did you did you consciously make an effort to learn to write faster, or has this always come naturally to you? To read
I mean,
faster. It's good. Yeah.
to read faster. So I've always been a speed reader. I my reading journey began many moons ago. Now I started off. I think really the first book that made me a diehard reader was my dad. He came back from a trip from returned to Japan from a trip to the United States, and he brought the complete work of Sherlock Holmes, which
Nice.
I still have on my shelf.
That's cool.
And I ripped through this chonker of a book in about a weekend. And I
Mhm.
was 10 years old at the time. So that tells you a little bit about like where my life was destined to go, who I was destined to become.
Right.
I've always been able to read quickly because I have kind of um, an active brain. I'm not going to say an excessively fast brain, but I think a lot, I talk a lot, so I can usually absorb information pretty quickly. So reading, and especially if it's something I'm interested in, I can rip through stories quickly.
Yeah.
Um, when it's something that's very, very good, I find I get kind of swept up and I want to know more and I become addicted.
Yeah.
If it's something that I'm a little bit less interested in, I will kind of go faster and speed read to get to the interesting parts so I don't feel like I'm slogging through anything. So it's very rare that a book will take a long time for me because it's either I'm really engaged or I'm really looking forward to whatever the next book is.
Right. Yeah. Sounds like yeah. In either instance, you're reading fast. So I picked up a book like on speed reading a while ago because I just again like read a lot and write a lot, and I like reading anyway.
Yeah,
And I'm like maybe I always kind of shunned the idea of speed reading because I felt like I'd be losing something in the experience. But at some point, I was
yeah,
like, you know what? Let me just see what this even has to say because I want to be consuming more stories. So let's
yeah,
see. So one of the things that like it kind of talked about like really early on was that the way that we learn to read is that we are taught to read out loud like in front of class and that sort of thing, right? But
yeah.
that teaches us like when we're then transitioned to reading silently, we're speaking every word in our head, and that slows us down. And part of what it's teaching in the speed reading is to like be able to read and you can still process, but you don't necessarily need to say every word in your head. Is that how you read? You don't say every word in your head?
Yeah, so I don't think I have aphantasia. Like I can see pictures in my head, but I feel like I'm engaged more in the the shape of the words, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. Like the words are what draw me in as opposed to whatever picture I'm seeing. I have a very vague picture in my head of
Mhm.
whatever I'm seeing. So it's like the shape of the words and sort of the emotions that they elicit, through the reading that really draws me in. So when I'm really on a tear, it's those words that are just flying by because they just sing on the page. Like the books that are vying for my two top reads of the year are Empire of the Damned by J. Christoph and Play of Shadows by Sebastian de Castell. And both of these, the writing is just so smooth and efficient that it's almost like lyrics in your head that just kind of sweep you up. And this is why they're, my two top books of the year, because they're just so well done. The books that are a little bit more of a slog are the ones where I have a harder time with, let's say, the word choices, the sentence structure. But typically, if the story is good, or the plot is engaging, or the characters are really good, or the emotional work is there, I can
Right.
kind of push that aside and really get into it. Um,
Sure.
but yeah, really, it's the words that kind of sweep me up more than any visuals. I think if I saw the movie in my head, I'd almost want to read slower to really bask in that vivid imagery.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting. Yeah. Well, any kind of like tips for trying to read faster? And that's my last question on reading fast, but
Yes, actually, the very, very simplest one is make your font bigger on your tablet or your phone. It
interesting.
is
Okay.
ridiculous how effective this is. As you can see, I have rubbish eyes. I read while I run on the treadmill, and right now I've started reading while just at the top of the hill above our complex. There's a concrete walking trail. So I take my tablet and I read while I walk. I don't speed walk. I walk at a good clip. But because the font is so big, it's literally like 15 lines for the whole iPad screen or whatever. It's so easy to see. So you kind of just it's almost no strain for your eyes to be kind of swept up in the writing. So you also end up flipping pages a lot faster because there's fewer words per page, so you feel like you're making more progress. So it's easier to kind of get sucked into just one more chapter because it's quick and it's easy. So I find that since I've started reading with bigger font on my tablet, I can get through a lot more than I would like reading regular size font in a book.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. Um
So often, if I'm reading a physical book, as you can see behind me, I love collecting physical books. I'll find the digital version on like Kindle Unlimited, or get the Kindle version, or if it's an ARC, get the digital version from the author, and then I'll have the paperback for when I'm kind of sitting and I'm relaxing and enjoying and kind of getting into it. And then when I'm out and about or anything like that, or reading on my paddleboard, I can take my iPad and I don't have to worry about the book getting damaged or whatever.
read on your paddle. That's amazing. I like that. I love paddleboarding.
It's
I haven't
delightful.
haven't tried
Yeah,
reading while I'm on it. I would probably go for the audiobook while I'm on the paddleboard though. But
it is amazing. I ripped through the entire Greatcoats
nice.
series. It became one of my like top 10 of all times because I was listening to the audiobook while kayaking in the heat of summer. I kayaked and got like sunburned multiple times because
Yeah.
I wanted just a little bit more.
Nice, nice, nice. All right, so let's talk about writing and especially writing fast. But let's kind of talk, about all your books. When did you publish your first book? Like roughly what year?
First book was published in so I self-published one in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
It got moderate reviews, very few sales, but it was the good sort of learning experience. And then I released sort of what I'm going to call my debut novel through a small indie press in 2015. That was the book that would one day become Darkblade Assassin.
Nice. Okay. All right. So we'll say 9 years because we'll not say the
Yeah.
2014. We'll say 9 years. And how many books do you have out in the world now? You have six different series, right?
Yeah. I'm going to say 45. I I I have to count them again because so for the last for the first Night Guild Kickstarter that I ran, I wrote 2 stories, a novella and a novel, and the novella will be coming out later. So I have to remember whether or not to count it or not. Even it's written, it's edited, and everything.
Yeah.
So it's we're gonna say 45 plus. That's a good round number to work with.
40. All right. 45 plus. So on average, you're writing 5 freaking books a year. Like just the math, 5 divided by
Yeah.
9, 5 books a year. Damn.
Well, so not anymore. When I was writing my sci-fi series, the Cerberus series, that was a book a month because they were just an easy 100,000 words, right? Right now, the books that I write are 200 to 300,000. So
Sure.
that takes about 2.5 months. So I think this year I will have released 2 or 3 books because they're so long.
This year I'll be closing in on like 1 million words in the year, but it's tough. It's tough. Yeah. Like, okay. All right. So here, like, all right. Again, yeah, you've got a backlog of 45 books now, and you're cranking them out. You're starting to write longer and longer books. Awesome. And of course, like these days, you are a full-time writer, right? You don't have to do any more of that content writing, right? Okay.
So I actually keep some there because for about 3 years I was doing only writing, and those low royalty months. I mean, you can see how little hair I have left after those low royalty months. So I was like, you know what? I need a little bit of income that I can count on
Wow.
from month to month. It's just like a mental safety net in the sense of if I ever have a month where Amazon dries up and my books go from where they're selling down to zero, I have at least money coming in, and like going back to having, like I say, I'm like 80% full time as an author just because I keep my hand in these other projects for my mental stability.
That's even more crazy. Yes, NJ Alexander, Nicholas sitting there just flabbergasted. It's true. So like you could be full time. You were full time. You've decided instead you want to write more words so that you can have that sort of like stable income. So like, whew, okay, all right, that's nuts. That you understand that this is crazy, right? You do understand this, like,
I do.
okay,
I saw the stack of my books for the first time a couple of months ago, and I was like, "What kind of asshole has that much to say?" Like it was unreal. You don't think about it, right?
it's
You
funny.
just sit down and you write the words day after day after day, and then all of a sudden you look and you've written a 400,000 word novel,
Like,
and then you look and you've written 8 books over 200,000 words. It's like,
yeah.
wait, what?
How many different ways are the assassins in multiple different series gonna kill people right now?
Right? The good news is that there are always new ways to kill people. It's just having more fun.
Yeah,
Honestly,
yeah.
so my Cerberus series, it became 12 books
Okay.
because I created this character. So he is a former drug addict,
Mm-hmm.
paraplegic, special forces sniper turned government hitman wearing an AI powered suit of armor. So you need to have all kinds of cool matchups like sniper versus sniper, or
Of course.
special ops versus special ops, or AI versus AI, or
Absolutely.
so basically I made this list of all of these versus. Literally, it was called Nolan is the main character, Nolan versus the AI, Nolan versus the whatever, Nolan versus the, and then I came up with some kind of sci-fi sounding title after the book was written, but it
Yeah.
was really just these matchups, and
That's
and
funny.
they ended up being so much fun because every book was tonally so different. Like I have yet to see a sniper versus sniper battle outside of Ghost in the Shell or Enemy at the Gates,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I got to write one. I had to create this whole book just to write this tense 3-chapter scene of 2 snipers trying to shoot at each other. Like this is what I live for.
I love it. I love it. All right. Okay. So I wanted to kind of set this up, and talk about all the books you've written and the just massive amount of words you've written. But to kind of get serious about it for a minute, like, again, I keep kind of harkening back to it, but read a lot and write a lot, right? Like, if you want to kind of have a successful career as a writer, writing a lot is really, really helpful. So just thinking about, like, if you if you hadn't written the entire backlog library that you have now, and instead you wrote, like a third of it, like, I imagine you probably wouldn't be in the same position you're at right now, right?
Oh no. No, no. This is the risks that I am able to take
Hmm.
as a self-published author, knowing that I have seen whatever level of success I have, we're going to say 6 times now, right? Not every series is Darkblade. Darkblade is the one that somehow people keep loving, right? It's the gift that keeps on giving. I am immensely grateful. But I've written 6 series. Some of them have done great. Some of them are diehard fan loved series, but they haven't sold. Whatever the case is, I have proven that I can, to myself. Like we're not talking about I am
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
I've proven to myself that I can craft a story that people will read and they will love, even if it's 20 people, right? Because the book isn't selling to to
sure.
the thousands. The reviews, I don't think I have a single book under 4.2 stars or 4.3 stars, right? This is
Yeah,
just people have loved the books that I've written. So this
right.
creates a certain degree of confidence that kind of it's kind of the foundation upon which I cast myself
Yeah,
again and again. Like writers, imposter syndrome, creative doubt. This is real, right? Anxiety is. I am a highly neurotic person, so it is through the roof. But all I have to do is like I've done this before. This is book 45. People have not yet hated anything that I've written.
yeah, right.
Whatever I'm doing now, it cannot be worse than what I've written in the past. So actually, when I set out to rewrite Darkblade, it was Hero of Darkness before. Rewrote the whole thing, relaunched it in 2021. That is the closest that I've come to total paralysis in my life. Like the first, I'm going to say the first 15 to 20 chapters, it was like, am I even am I even doing the right thing? Because it was like if I had written 30 some books by that point. So it was like if I can't make this 5 years and 30 some books better than when I first wrote it back in 2015,
Yeah.
has my life been a waste? Whatever the outcome, I am happy with it. I have proven that those years have not been a waste. Darkblade is a series I am inordinately proud of.
Yes.
So
Yes.
kind of going back to that again and again and again, where it's like, okay, I've done this before. I have always managed to land this ship adequately to where people don't hate it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is, I'm going to say, one of my biggest contributors to my writing speed and my output, because it's like
Wow.
I get to these points in my outlines or my story plan where I'm like, wait, I had this in mind, and all of a sudden it's going here. Why? As an example, in Darkblade Book 9 that I finished just the other week, a couple of months ago, the original plan, it's a murder mystery set on a ship. So the original plan was get to the ship, meet all the potential suspects, murder happens, interrogate all the potential suspects, second murder happens, end of part 1, then part 2, all the stuff. Didn't work out that way. Murder happens, interrogate 2 people, murderer is discovered, big fight scene, closure. Oh, wait, murder happens, part 2 begins, and now you have to go and interview everybody. But it just felt right for the flow of the story that I was trying to tell to have that ending so much sooner without getting into the backstories and the interviews. So I was like, okay, this feels wrong for the outline that I've created, but because I have landed this ship 8 times with Darkblade, so many times with these other books, I'm going to trust my writer's instinct
Yeah.
and go with it. And the end product, I had a really good time writing it. The 5 people who've read it so far, the beta readers, are like, this was a blast. So that, again, it's one more little piece of the foundation upon which I cast myself when the self-doubt comes. So
Nice.
if you can learn to trust yourself as a writer creatively,
Yeah.
whether it's through, writing repeated books or knowing that people resonated with the story you've told before, whether
Right.
it's one book or 10 books. That is a major, major contributor to writing speed, because you don't have to sort of second guess yourself. You lean into whatever is coming, trusting that you can you can write your way through it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. Yeah, and that totally makes sense. Like that sort of the next book is easier than the last book, and you have the confidence to sort of build on and the expertise to build on and that sort of thing. But in addition, kind of, yeah, I wanted to m- emphasize the point of like writing speed is important to a writing career, and you said it very well in that like not only
Yeah,
has it improved your confidence and because you're able to kind of demonstrate that you've done the thing right, but also you're the ones that haven't been quite as successful as the other ones, you have both of those to sort of propel your career forward, right? And along the way you
exactly.
just keep getting to be a better and better writer as you're making more and more of the books, right?
Yeah, you just flex more muscles, you develop your skills in one new way after another. Like, humor has never been my strong suit, but after writing this book that I'm working on now, I'm like, okay, can I do humor? I don't know, but I'm having fun with it, so let's
Yeah.
go.
I want.
I will say that sorry, about the writing speed, because I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
write fast. It gives me the confidence to write a full series or most of a series before I release the first book, because I'm like, okay, if
Oh,
this doesn't
interesting.
work, it's been 6 months of writing time, right? I
Yeah,
am
it's
always
huge, right?
working 6 months ahead, right? I'm always working at least 6 months ahead. So I'm like, okay, it's 6 months of my life, right? It's still something that I am creatively proud of, even if it doesn't sell, and I can always just write the next one.
Yeah.
So there is this certain, I'm going to say, big dick energy, big creative energy,
Yeah,
that it's
yeah.
like I can do the next one. So the series that I'm writing right now was kind of an unexpected sort of twist away from other projects that I had planned. But I was like, well, it's going to take me 6 months of my life to write it, and I can always work in other stuff around it. And it's just, it kind of makes it easy to say, sure, I can indulge in
Yeah.
this
Fuck it, I'll try it.
experiment
Yeah.
creatively or business. Exactly.
Right, right. I love that. Well, I mean, big dick energy for sure, but I feel like I want to call it big pen energy just because it's for
That,
writing,
boom,
right?
so much better. BPE. Make that on a bookmark, and I will buy 100.
There we go. Big pen.
It's
So
a pen
so
with two inkwells next to it. Yeah, that's the kind of humor that my brain has been working on in this book. So
this is very very dungeon crawler Carl humor. I like, like
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. Like, so many of my best jokes, or sort of ironic and humorous situations, have
Yeah.
come up while I'm listening to Dungeon Crawler
Yeah.
Crawl. I listened to the first two books while I was renovating my house a couple of months ago, before I had started working on this series.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, Donut says and does this ridiculous thing.
Mhm.
What's something sort of equally ridiculous that I can do here? Or the way that it's just like in the Dungeon Anarchist cookbook, they
Mhm.
just go back and they hack off that poor goblin's limbs over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's dark but so funny when it's like, well, we got to go get another set of limbs.
Oh
So
damn
that's
it.
it's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
leaning into that.
Yeah. That's good stuff. I really I want to talk more about writing humor, but I want to stick with the speed for. So I feel like we've
Yeah,
established the importance of writing fast and why it's a benefit for a writing career and it's a good thing. I'd like to spend a little bit of time of talking like nuts and bolts about how you write fast. So first question,
sure.
like what is your daily routine like? Because I think that anyone that's doing something very
Yeah,
consistently and quickly is probably a little bit rigorous about it.
very much so. So 6 a.m. alarm goes off, 7 a.m. writing starts. I keep my morning 7 to 8:30 for business, for articles, for book reviews. Like, I write book reviews for FanFi Addict right now, so I do all that kind of stuff in the morning. 8:30, 9, go breakfast. 10 o'clock back at my desk to start writing till 12. Within 2 hours, I've got the chapter. Typically, it's like hour 15, hour 30, but I give myself 2 hours because I know that after 2 hours, if the chapter's not done, my brain is sludge. So something's wrong. But
When you say
typically,
we say
an hour and a half is enough.
the chapter, like what's the word count we're talking about here?
2,000, 2,500. Well, no. So I've started accepting shorter chapters, 1,500, if the flow of the story feels right. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm very much an intuitive writer. I have like no education in that area. Everything has been trial and error. Everything has been kind of groping blindly through the creative morass, which is, kind of my approach to anything. Just throw myself into the deep end, and here we are.
Yes. Same.
But yeah, within that 2 hour slot, I'm done with the chapter. Social media, filming videos, editing videos, posting to social media, Instagram and TikTok, 12 to 12:30. Lunch at 12:30. 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. I need a break for my brain. I cannot really do any more creative stuff. So I read. I will sit in my little couch in my office or lie on the couch in my living room, and I will read for an hour and hopefully doze off for about 20 minutes with my alarm set to go off at 2 o'clock. Like every single day, 2 o'clock, alarm goes off, right? So that's how I have managed to get more reading done recently is I've carved out this hour in the middle of the day because I need that creative refresh and I need a break. And when I read, I get drowsy and I get to take a 20-minute little, power nap, and my brain is back on full steam ahead right afterward.
Yeah.
2 o'clock, go make coffee, sit down. 2:30, 2:45, I'm back. I work in my brain works in quarter hours. So if I'm not ready to start work at 2:30, it's 2:45. But it's like, on the minute I start. It's one of those mental crutches, but you don't give yourself an out. It's 2:30, writing starts, whether I'm feeling it or not. It's kind of the way that I've made myself do it. And then typically by 4:30, I'm done and off to do, to go to the gym, listening to an audiobook, going for a walk, reading, going paddleboarding, whatever the case is, doing evening stuff. But basically my work day is divided into these 2 hour chunks with, like odd admin tasks broken up between.
Interesting. Okay. Okay. So in that morning chunk and then that like afternoon 2 o'clock chunk, both of those you're trying to do a chapter that's around like between 1,500 and like 2,500 ish, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Go ahead.
So you do that 5 days a week,
Yeah.
10 chapters a week, 20 to 25,000. That's an 80 to 100,000 word novel in a month. Like you hear it like that. It's not so bad.
Do right. I mean, like I get you, but like, yeah. Um. Okay. Yeah. I get it. Um.
Hearing it broken down like that, it it really does seem more achievable when you factor in that I can type 90 words a minute.
Sure.
And so that 90 words a minute in an hour is 5,000 words, which I never actually get to. So it's it
Yeah.
kind of comes out in the wash.
Are you more of a planner or a pantser?
So I always have an outline. I need to have an outline before I dive into the story because I need to know where my creative brain is going to go off on a tangent, but it's always a tangent that I need to work back toward whatever the overarching plot was. So having that is the secret, I will say, to the success. Like the other piece of the secret to success is having an idea of where the story is going.
Right.
Because if I know where the story is going, I can figure out the most epic, the most emotional, the most rhythmic. Like books are beats. It's all about the beats. Every scene, every paragraph, every chapter. It's all about those beats. The ups and the downs. So as long as I have an outline, I can figure out, or I kind of intuit when I've had enough of each scene to move on to the next one. But it's always where it's going next, and it's always working through that way.
Yeah. 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 Cool. Yeah, and I feel like obviously with I would think with an outline like it's easier to kind of sit down and be like, okay, time for the next words. And I'm the same way. I'm
Yeah.
I'm a planner. I can't there's no way I could pants a whole book. It would be a mess. But
Chaos.
right. So when you're doing these writing sessions, like these 2 hour big sprints, what do you do? And like honestly, what do you do throughout the whole day to tune out distractions? What do you do to make sure that you're focused on the work and not like, oh hey, like this interesting conversation's going on Twitter or whatever, you know?
Yeah. So when I am writing, when I start writing, I close all of my tabs and I only have the thesaurus open. Right.
Hmm.
That is the one tab that I have open when I start writing. It all open more as I'm researching or looking for names or whatever it is. But the thesaurus is the only one. The phone, it doesn't get turned off, but it gets turned upside down so I can't see it. Right.
Do you keep
Um,
it within arm's reach, or I've
they,
started to put it like away where I can't reach it?
I'm usually pretty disciplined. If I can't see it, I don't really care. Like I can't see the screen light up with a notification. I can block it out. But I found that my brain and a lot of people's brains, it's basically divided into thirds, or what brain when it comes to attentions.
Hmm.
So you need to break down these thirds and then engage each of them. So like the writing is 1/3, right? The creative mind is the 1/3, but just creating is often not enough, especially when you start to struggle. So
Hmm.
you need something to block out the outside, which is music. Most of us work, write with music because music kind of keeps that part of your brain, the auditory part of your brain, which is very directly connected because it's such a short distance to travel. So it's engaged. But then there's still 1/3 missing, and that is usually like tactile, right? Or so you have a cup of coffee. So if you've got the taste of coffee in your mouth, that part of your brain is engaged with the coffee, or you're drinking the coffee. Or I find that chewing gum, it engages that 1/3 of the brain. So the mouth is busy, the ears are busy, the eyes are busy, the hands are busy. As long as I don't have like a terrible sunburn or a backache that's drawing my attention away,
Yeah.
all of these things are kind of harnessed. The full brain is either occupied or centered,
Yeah.
and then they're like distractions don't really have place in the brain.
Like that seems so uh uh unimportant, the gum, but like I actually think like I want to try that, and I think that's going to make a big difference because I feel like it's sort of
Yeah,
like fidgeting in a different way that I think could be
yeah.
really effective, you know?
It's super. Or I found that it's super productive because, like, if you're just listening to music and writing, there's like I don't know, maybe, my brain still has a little bit of energy left that needs to expend.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like if I'm not doing something with my mouth, whether it's drinking or chewing gum or something, there's just that little bit of energy that it's like like the squirrel brain. So I'm
Yeah.
like, no, we're harnessing all of this. So I have a hard time writing sometimes in public because I'm focused on the thing, but then there's like movement behind, and that'll sometimes draw my attention.
Yeah.
So I've gotten good over the years at kind of blocking it all out.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like it really takes a lot more effort to kind of engage fully for the creative process to kind of take over your mind.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. Sometimes I prefer to write in public because like I get a little bit less of the like squirrel shiny car, and like even when like someone's sort of walking by or whatever, that sort of occupies that 1/3 of the brain for me. But I get it. Yeah, like it's not for everyone. Um, really interesting. All right, so last question on terms of like writing speed. I think that there is a trap that especially newer writers, I think, but not necessarily newer writers, but they can fall into where they feel like more time on a work is going to equal better quality. And I think that that's not always true. And what are your thoughts on that? And I can't imagine that that's your belief, right? So how do you sort of like squash that so that you're like, no, this is like, yes, I wrote this and I produced this book like quickly, but it's good, and I don't need to question like, would this be better if I spent another 2 years on it?
Well, I know for a fact that if I agonized over every word and sentence,
Yeah.
my books could be better. The question is how much better, right?
Okay.
So there's the law of diminishing returns.
Hmm.
If I write a book in 3 months and it sells, we're going to say it sells 100 copies. If I spend 6 months on it, will it sell 200 copies or will it sell 150? If I
Right.
spend 9 months, will it sell 250 or 300 or will it sell 175? With the additional time, the return diminishes. There are authors who do this and they produce works of art, right?
Right.
And my hat is 100% off to them because they make things that I just fall in love with. And just like V.E. Schwab, right? Her writing is so lyrical. Guy Gavriel Kay, so much poetry. These are the kind of people who I assume agonize over every single word, and their work 100% reflects it. So if you are that kind of writer who does that, do it. But remember, I'm a writer. My brain is very much writery brain. I'm analytical. I know about writing, good writing, bad writing. So I analyze that. How much does your average reader know about the difference between, you know, whom or who? It's a dumb excuse. It's a dumb thing to say, but sometimes you don't necessarily need to write the next masterpiece. I have it very clear in my head. I will never be the next, Brandon Sanderson, Robert Jordan. I will never be the next Tolstoy or Stephen King. I will be someone who puts my heart and soul into writing a story with all the emotional gut punches and stakes and epic action as I can. And that's about the best I could do. So I could spend more time polishing every single story I write, or I could just write another story and I can explore it deeper and I can get better at the next one and the next one and the next one. So I am firmly of the opinion that a good story that's well written the first time could benefit from additional passes, but is not necessarily going to demand them in order to be super, super good. Because some of the best stories that I've written, the first thing that I wrote, I was 19 years old. I wrote it in an hour and a half, and it is the story that this person who wrote comic book, she said, I love this. I want to turn this into a comic book. I wrote it in an hour and a half at the age of 19, right? That's kind of proof that the art is so subjective. It's so much in the eye of the beholder
Right.
that if I don't necessarily need to do that because a lot of people don't necessarily know the difference between a 6 month manuscript, a 10-year manuscript, or a 3 month manuscript.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think, like, I mean, if you look at it just from a business point of view, you make such a good case of in terms of like the number of sales and that point of But yeah, how much better, even like how much more moving is it going to be to a person if you look at it from that point of view?
Yeah,
If you spend a bunch more time on it, but yeah,
I,
I
I I definitely did it with my earlier books. I would say the first 10, 10 books seems about right. I did that where I would write it, I would put it aside, I would come back to it after writing the next book. I would, rewrite it and then print it out and go over it with the marker and, edit it like that and kind of do the whole thing. And I think that it made me more aware of my failings as an author so that when I sat down to write book 11 and beyond, I had a better sense of where I needed to improve. I still have some of those same problems today that I did then.
yeah,
They're just not a problem to anybody else other than me, or they're not really a problem that stops people from enjoying it. Like I still get a complaint about, like, one of the most common bad reviews on my books is that I repeat myself. I remind myself, and thereby the reader, too much of the stakes. Right, some emotional impact. I might harp on it too much. Thankfully, I have an editor and beta readers who kind of say, okay, dial it back. But even then, I could probably, smooth it down way more. Is that going to make people, is that going to change their rating from a 4 star to a 5 star, or a 4.5 star to a 5 star? Or is it
don't
going to
hear
make a big
still. Yeah,
difference?
yeah, yeah. Right,
I don't know.
right. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
and then
very
is
much
it
of the
worth it to take
opinion,
the time to do that when the
yeah,
returns are so unknowable? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think makes sense.
eventually. Doing it in the beginning is very, very good practice for improving and tightening your writing. You're going to get to that point where you no longer need it to produce a beautifully written, finished product.
Yeah,
And that's when you can start putting out books a lot faster.
yeah. Fair. All right, I did kind of lie because I said that was going to be the last question, and now I've got I thought of like two more that I did want to ask. So
Bring it on.
so number one, kind of from the like 30,000 foot view, what is your like editing process in terms of like how many passes do you do and that sort of thing? And then number two, kind of, again, writing speed and process related question. Um, having put out 45 books, like so many every year, um, what have you done to sort of streamline your self-publishing process? Like, do you have kind of a catalog of cover designers that you're like, you just go to, this one, or what does it look like for you to be able to do all of it so fast?
So I'll answer the second one first, and then if I don't remember the first one, you can remind me.
Yep.
Yeah, so I have the same editor that I've used for every single one of my books to date, right? All the ones that I've self-published. He knows my writing style. He knows what I'm trying to do. He does developmental edits for me. He's like, yeah, I see what you're trying to do here. Make this better. His suggestions have improved my book every single time. But first, they go to my team of beta readers,
Mm-hmm.
who I have amassed because each of them brings a specific skill. Some of them are great at syntactical errors and typos and spelling mistakes. Others are really good at, you said his eyes were blue, and then 100 pages later, this character who you only ever met once, you now said his eyes are green. Things like that, where it's just like,
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that, right? So all these people, they do an amazing job of tightening up my writing. And I've come to the point where I feel like if they don't feel the need to call something out, like I've told them, anything, no matter how small, point it out to me. If you think it needs to be improved, if it's a mistake, whatever it is, point it out. If they don't, if they have no notes on that paragraph, why do I need to take another pass at it if they haven't? That's kind of the way that I approach my editing process at this point. So it goes to the beta readers. I try to get it done within a month. Like I ask them, can you do this within a month? Giving them plenty of leeway because they all have busy lives. Some of these books are very, very long, but within a month, usually they'll get it back to me. I will take a few days typically to address all of their notes and comments and changes and stuff. At this point, it's not massive overhauling. It's, maybe an extra scene here and there, a few paragraphs, a few explanations, and then it's off to the editor. The editor is lightning fast. He can usually get it back to me within 2 to 4 weeks, barring unforeseen circumstances. Once that's done, I still make sure that I give myself a good cushion of 2 to 3 months before the book is published, because I don't want, some holdup in the cover design or in the editing or in the whatever it is to give me any grief, right? But I will have the cover made as soon as I finish writing the book the first time, because the artist, especially for Darkblade, the artist is insanely busy. He does the Dungeon Crawler Carl covers.
Oh, nice.
So he is always busy. Yeah. So I'm like, listen, I'm starting to write this book now. Give me your next available time. And because we've done 10 Darkblade covers together, 12 now. He's like, I got you. So that's kind of, I always have things planned out about 6 months in advance, because there is nothing that I hate more than that last minute stress of, oh my God, it's almost publishing date and I don't have a manuscript or a cover or whatever it is. So everything is set well in advance. And because I finished the book, and as soon as I send it off to the beta readers, I'm working on the next one. So there's always a turnover. There's always a book or two in the hopper.
Yeah.
And so while on a monthly basis, I'm always making sure that I have artists on hand, especially for cover design, because one will be super busy, or look at Felix Ortiz. I had Felix Ortiz do 4 covers for me in 2018.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I could not get him to do a cover for me because he is just too busy.
Yeah.
The same guy, Luciano Fleitas, who does the Dungeon Crawler Carl covers, he's too busy. He still makes time for me to do the Darkblade, but if I wanted to do my other series, he may or may not have time. So I'm always trying to find new artists. So I'm always planning ahead to make sure that I have art, because I want to take time to research, what I want the cover to look like based on what's popular, what's selling, what I think will be evergreen. Like, I am done creating covers that are trendy now, because I did a whole line of photo manipulation covers, which were the total norm in 2018, and 2019, those things went out the door. Sure. So it's very much, kind of making sure that I always have a stable of people on hand to do the things that I need to do. I do all the formatting and layout myself.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
again,
no.
that's one of those things.
You at this point you would have had to pay for it 45 times. You save a lot of money by doing it
That's
yourself.
a lot of money. That's Yeah, exactly. And I can do whatever I want
Yeah.
with the formatting. There are challenges. So Darkblade 6 was 425,000 words.
Wow.
The font size is literally like 9. Like it's so small, insultingly small to blind people like me.
But yeah, otherwise
um,
you had to be smaller. You'd have a 2,000 word
yeah,
book, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And so then what was the first question? There was a 30,000 foot
Yeah.
view of.
Well, I think you've kind of touched on both, but yeah, the second question was kind of like the whole editing process, and I think like you've definitely hit that. You've got kind of, you do the betas, then you have the editors, and you don't you it's I think you do your own edit after the betas read it, but
Yeah,
you only edit the things that they have feedback on, and then you give it to your
exactly.
editor, and you're doing that, and then you're doing your own layout and your own kind of design, and you're
Yeah,
constantly getting new cover designers.
yeah. And when I send the finished manuscript to my ARC readers,
Uh-huh.
and I tell them, please, if there's any typos, I can fix it before launch. Send them
Yeah.
to me. So I'll still get 5 or 6 lists of typos, and they're all small things.
Right.
So usually by the time the book launches, there is a very small number of typos in
Mm-hmm.
each book.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen.
Exactly.
Yep. Yeah, the other question was kind of 30,000 foot view on sort of like your editing passes, but again, I think you've covered that. It sounds like
Mm,
you do your own edit after the betas, and then you do more editing after the editor, and then you're done,
yeah.
right?
Yep. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Definitely. Yeah. Solid process. Just thinking. Yeah. Okay. Um. What what made you want to go and rewrite Darkblade 5 years down the road? I mean, that's kind of a big deal. Usually, like when a book is done, it's
It
done. You know.
This is I don't know for a fact, but it's very possible that I am the first person to kind of do such a big overhaul. Definitely the first indie fantasy author that I know to do such a big overhaul. It all comes down to quality.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote, the Hero of Darkness, The Last Busolari, right? These are the original titles of the book. That was the first book that I ever wrote, aside from this one that does not exist and no one will ever be able to find.
I got one of
Which
those.
I will one day rewrite. I have a plan to rewrite it and re-release it inside my world.
I've got one of those books. I have no plan to rewrite it. No one's gonna see it. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I wrote this book back in 2015, the first thing, and like looking back, I was like, my God, I made so many rookie mistakes. There was head
Sure.
hopping. There was stuff that I was like looking back, I was like, ooh, I should not have done that. So knowing this, I was like, I can do this better. I had written 36 books at that point. By 36 books, I had gotten a better sense of who I am and what I was capable of. So I sent it to someone whose opinion I trust immensely, and she did a deep dive developmental edit, and she was like, "Your instincts are right about this. There's this. Of the original 6 books, 2 remained largely unchanged. 2, the last 2, 5 and 6, they were written.
Sure.
They were like books 9 and 10 or something that I had written, right?
Yeah.
Other than that, they needed to be fixed, they needed to be tightened, they needed to be tweaked. There was stuff that I knew I could do better. So like going back and rewriting it, it was like, this is a book that I want to be able to say, this is a product that I, Andy of 2020 at the time, can be proud of. It is an amazing story that people are still reading years after. Like to date, the whole series has sold over 250,000 books,
Woo-woo.
right?
Nice.
That which is wild.
Yeah.
Like I am flummoxed by that number because I wrote this thing, right? I can't wrap my head around it.
That's awesome.
But people love the story. So I'm like, they love this character so much. They love his struggle so much. I can give it to them better. So I went back with that intention of making this a story that I could really be proud to promote without saying, oh, it's a great story, but there's some technical issues, or, oh, it was my first book, so have pity. I didn't want that. I wanted this to be, this is fucking Darkblade. let's go. And that's how it is now. It is the book that I will say, I don't know if I could call it my greatest work to date, but it is definitely the biggest and most ambitious project that I have tackled and perhaps ever will tackle. Because after, like, this is going to be 15 books,
Yep.
15 books, each of them over 200,000 words.
Wow.
This is like Wheel of Time sized writing, and
Yeah.
each of them are woven in with the other series that I've written. So even the sci-fi series, they fly over the planet where all this is taking place. The Dragon Blood Assassin series that I wrote with Jamie Castle, I found a way to bring characters from that world into the world of Darkblade. The book that I'm writing now, a
Nice.
character from the city of Varamis makes an appearance, and he's like, yeah, where I come from, it's like a fucking world away, right? Just doing things like that. So people, they're like, oh, I love this, there's more here, there's more there. So kind of weaving that tapestry,
Yeah.
it kind of keeps people coming back over and over again. And that was what I wanted to do when I set out to rewrite Darkblade, was just keep people coming back for great story after great story, or the best story I could write after the best story I could write.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Love it. Um, I kind of I want to talk writing humor. I have another question, but we've already been talking for a while. I want to be respectful. You want to just talk humor, or should we ask more? What do you think?
Let's do two questions. Two questions I got time for.
You're the man. You're the man. All right. So you're doing all these different series. How have you chosen what to write when, and sort of how are you like balancing working? Like I have literally I have a wonderful little group of writer friends. We all got a Discord server on, and so one guy he's written a novella and he's about to put out his like debut for his first series, and he's like, so I'm kind of thinking of doing a different series sometime. Am I crazy? Like, so what's your advice to him? you know?
You are absolutely crazy, but you can. I like to call it the Josiah Roselle. He does that. He bounces between series. He's got that. He's got a brain that it works for. Me, I am like a one
One series at a time.
pony writer, right? Yeah.
One
So
pony.
with
Yeah.
with with Darkblade being so enormous,
Hmm.
I cannot really do that, right? I have to mix other stuff
Hmm.
in order to keep, doing these other projects. I didn't set out to write Dragon Blood Assassin. Jamie Castle was like, dude, you write Assassins. I have this idea. Let's do it. I was in. This book I'm writing now, again, Jamie Castle's fault, 100%. He's like, dude, I have this project. I want you to do it for me. So things keep coming up. I actually have a project, that I talked about with Josiah Roselle that we're both super into. It's just been too much to find time between all our schedules.
Sure.
If I could write one story all the way through to completion, I am happy because I kind of marinate in the idea and I really get a sense and I really feel it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but for the sake of the business, which is what I'm a very business forward creator. We'll say everything is about, can I make this project sell? Will this contribute in some way towards my author platform, in some meaningful way. So bouncing between these various series like I have been is kind of been necessary. But I would much rather write one series at a time. I just can't write 250,000 words back to back. That's a hard one.
Yeah. Sure. No, I feel you. I feel you. Cool. All right. All right. Final topic: writing humor, which you're doing now. I love it. I tend to work in like humor with a lot of my writing, just because like that's kind of who I am, or at least I try to. Like it remains to be seen if I actually like do it well. But it's tough, man, because there's so much fewer tools you have on the page than you do when you're delivering a joke with a person, right? You don't have
Yes.
tone, you don't have timing, there's so much less that you get to work with. So I think like, in Dungeon Crawler Carl, part of like Donut's comedy works so well because she just doesn't have the same filter. Like how many freaking of Donut's like jokes are her talking about Carl
Oh yeah.
masturbating, like
Yeah.
and it works in the story. It's sort of silly and funny, but it's because it's like, wow, that is wildly inappropriate. But sure, the cat like can say it. Um, So what are you kind of finding? What's working for you? Like how like what sort of frustrations do you have too? And do you
I'm
wish like you could capture tone in a way
yeah.
that that's hard to do on a page? You know?
For the most part, I've really only struggled with one. I'm going to call it joke.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil it because I think it's one of my proudest
Yeah.
creations in this book.
Yeah.
But I couldn't figure out the delivery. Otherwise, though, it's just like, what is the most ridiculous thing that I can do right now?
Yeah.
And then how could that actually exist? Because the like a big part of certain so comedy is about like punchlines and jokes and things like that.
Right.
Humor, Sebastian de Castell explained the difference to me the other day. He was like, humor is about just funny circumstances, right? And people's reactions to it or things like that.
Yeah.
So, as an example, in this book that I'm writing, in the beginning, the character he's hunting a minotaur with a bunch of other people,
Hmm.
and this captain of this band of sort of mercenaries comes out, and behind him is this kid whose sole purpose in the company is to flutter the captain's cape to make him look heroic. Like, what the fuck is going on here, right? And then I had the brilliant idea to kill the captain.
Uh-huh.
So then you see this kid standing over the captain's body, fluttering the cape. Right? This is not a funny thing. The captain is dead.
Yeah.
His neck is broken, his head split open, but it's kind of funny because the kid's fluttering the fucking cape. Like, so this is kind of the way that I've approached the thing, is like, how can I make it real even if it's
Yeah.
stupid?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Dungeon Crawler Carl, like, this is what I've learned from Dungeon Crawler Carl. Like,
Yeah.
they go back and hack off that goblin dude's arm 37 times. That is dark shit.
Right. Right.
But
Right. Yeah.
but it's funny because the way it's set up and the way that they approach everything like that. So there is
Right.
this, I think it's more like absurdist humor
Yes.
that it's so shocking it would never happen in real life, but because the story is structured in a way that makes anything, it's a very Dungeons and Dragons flavor of world.
Right.
So it's all kinds of races and monsters and magical spells, so I can get away with quite literally anything
Hmm.
as long as I can rationalize it in a way that makes sense to the story. And this is why I love fantasy, is because I can get away with anything. Whereas, sci-fi, you have to follow science and all that kind of stuff. But so I don't do great at the punchlines. I've got a couple here and there because they're funny.
Yeah.
They're actually very funny, or I think they're funny, but they're not as comedic as I would say, or they don't have as much. I don't think there'll be those moments that really burn into your brain, like a
Yeah.
kid standing over his dead captain fluttering a cape. Like,
Right.
I'm so new to this whole humor thing that I wouldn't begin to be able to offer advice to anybody.
No, that well, and fair, but I still think it's just a sort of a fun discussion topic. So, and it sounds
It
like
really
your
is.
sort of approach to it then is sort of kind of creating these like funny scenarios, like the cape, right? It's not necessarily like it doesn't sound like you have sort of like one character that's like the funny character, you know. It's more that you're
Well,
like
there there
encompassing.
is there is one
Okay.
that's very very funny. Like, the whole point to this character is sort of badassery and comedic foil.
Uh-huh.
And so there's a lot of quips, there's a lot of one-liners, there's one a lot, there's very donut level of those one-off sort of jokes, but the donut stuff, the individual lines don't necessarily resonate as much as donut shouting in all caps in the text with Carl's. That's the funny. What she says doesn't matter, it's how she says it.
Right.
Or going and cutting off a goblin's arm 37 times. I don't remember, God damn it, donut is the line that it kind of keeps on giving, because anything can happen and Carl will say it and it gets a chuckle out of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
These are the moments that are funny. One-liners don't necessarily have the same impact without like the proper setup and the proper execution.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, Donuts one-liners are funnier because they're delivered in all caps. You know, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. And of course, I love the AI of the game too in Dungeon Crawler Carl.
yeah,
And like, but it's kind of yeah, like you come to expect the absurdity of the
exactly.
game, and it makes it work. You know,
So it's not about what the AI says one time. It's
right?
that every time the AI opens its mouth, something funny, sarcastic, ridiculous is going to come out of its mouth, and you're
Right,
going to be entertained. So you are
right.
you are basically laughing before it begins because it's continued to deliver this humor time and time again
Yeah,
without relying on one really really good punchline. And this is where humor versus comedy or comedic lines I
yeah.
think has more impact. People, they always laugh out loud in Kings of the Wild or Orconomics at the same moments, and they're not about what is said, but it's about the situation. Like, have you read Orconomics?
No, not yet. That's somewhere on
Okay,
the TBR. I have read Kings of the Wild though.
okay. So Orconomics, it nearly got me into a car accident. I was driving down the highway and I had to pull over to the side of the road because I was laughing at the absurdity of the situation. And it's
Yeah,
like there's the one line that sets off just how absurd it is, and then kind of the explanation, the rationalization, it just kind of digs that hole of absurdity deeper and it becomes funnier and funnier and funnier, but it's not about the one line. So like for humor, Zach Pike, that man knows how to deliver great comedy.
and on the page. Yeah. All right. I gotta. He's moving up the TBR a little bit. All right. I gotta.
But audiobook, please do the audiobook
I
because
will.
it is so good. Yes.
Nice. Okay. All right. Add that to the. I'm gonna make a note. I'm gonna make a note, Andy. Hang on. Because it was already on the TBR, but not necessarily audio. So.
I will point out right here. So this book, this shelf right here
Uh huh.
is my shelf of indie authors whose work I very much admire. As you can see, there's sort of Kaigen here, there's Rain and Ruin, there's Bastion, and this one right here,
Economics.
Orconomics. It is one of the very few indie author books that I have kept on my shelf because it is so good
Yeah.
at telling a great story and being funny at it.
Nice. Nice. Andy, what a lovely conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all this time, sir.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No. The pleasure is all mine. Where can people find and follow you online, sir?
Whew, okay, so my website, Andy Peloquin. I spend a lot of time these days on Instagram and TikTok because I have found that I like talking and I like talking about books, and people seem to like me talking about books. So that's kind of where I've been. I write reviews on FanFi Addict. If you care what I think about the books I read, you can go there. I post kind of as often as I can finish a book and write a review. Um, that's it, pretty much.
Yeah. All right. All right. Website, Instagram, and on Instagram and TikTok, just search for Andy Peloquin.
Yeah, Andy Peloquin author. It's the username on both platforms.
I gotta say too, I really love on Instagram you and that Noah's brisk reviews. You two been going back and forth with
That's
Floodlight.
been
That's been really fun.
fun.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really wanted to do something. So I've done a couple of buddy reads over on TikTok,
Uh huh.
and you can do like live conversations, but you can't do that on Instagram. So I would love to find a way to do it on Instagram because it is so much fun to read books with other people and kind of discover something cool together. Um, we've got another buddy read planned in October for DL Jennings.
Nice, nice, nice. I think Streamyard. Well, I know Streamyard. You can go live to Instagram, and you can do it with multiple people. So maybe that would be a way for you to do it. So
Hmm,
there you go.
interesting.
There you
I
go.
will look into it.
All right. Well, thank you again, Andy, and thank you, wonderful listeners, watchers that have been here hanging out. Been an absolute blast. I appreciate all the comments. Thanks, Bo. Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, Pippin. Thanks, everyone for dropping in, and for everyone around. If no one's told you today, you're an absolute legend.